October 5th, 1943. 20,000 feet above the endless blue of the Central Pacific, the morning sun flashes off aluminum wings as two formations close on each other at nearly 600 miles an hour. Inside the cramped cockpit of his Mitsubishi A6M0, Warrant Officer Toshiyuki Sueda leans forward, eyes narrowing behind his goggles. Below him, the ocean glitters like broken glass. Ahead, 3 American fighters climbing hard, nose high, engines howling. Wildcats. At least, that's what Sueda believes. He has seen the silhouette dozens of times since the early days of the war. Short fuselage, broad wings, American pilots straining upward, trying to gain altitude they never quite seem to hold. Sueda allows himself a thin smile. With 9 confirmed victories, he knows exactly how this fight ends. He keys his radio, voice calm, professional. American fighters attempting to climb. The zero formation tightens. These pilots have lived by a simple truth since 1941. No American fighter can follow them straight up. Not the P-40, not the Buffalo, not the Wildcat. Vertical combat belongs to Japan. Sueda advances the throttle and pulls back on the stick. The Zero responds like a living thing, light and eager. The nose rises sharply, wings slicing into thinner air as the engine roars behind him. This is his signature move, a vertical climbing loop. He's executed it again and again, drawing American pilots into impossible climbs before watching them stall, roll helplessly, and fall into his gunsight. Below, one of the American fighters commits. The enemy aircraft pitches up after him. Sueda feels a flicker of satisfaction. Another impatient American, another kill waiting to happen. The Zero climbs, and then something is wrong. The American fighter is still there. Not falling away, not stalling, still climbing. Sueda glances left, then right. His wingmen are beginning to lag, their Zeros losing energy as expected. But the American aircraft, dark blue, heavier, broader, keeps rising with him, engine screaming with a deeper, angrier note. His brow furrows. This is no Wildcat. The realization comes too late. Behind the gun sight of that climbing American fighter sits Ensign Robert Duncan, a fresh-faced U.S. Navy pilot with barely weeks of combat experience. His hands are tight on the controls, knuckles white inside his gloves. Sweat runs down his back despite the cold at altitude. Duncan is flying the Grumman F6F Hellcat, an aircraft that looks bulky compared to the Zero but hides brute strength beneath its skin. Its massive Pratt & Whitney engine is doing exactly what it was designed to do, drag the Hellcat upward faster and longer than any Japanese pilot expects. Duncan doesn't know Sueda's name. He doesn't know about the 9 victories or the reputation. All he knows is what his instructors drilled into him back aboard the carrier. Don't turn with a Zero. Use your power. Climb when they think you can't. The Hellcat surges upward, propeller biting hard into the thin air. The aircraft shudders, but it does not falter. The altimeter needle continues to spin. Sueda's confidence fractures. He pulls harder, trying to maintain the vertical loop, but the Zero's advantage, its lightness, has become its weakness. The engine begins to starve. The climb bleeds speed. The controls feel soft. And still, impossibly, the American is there. Sueda breaks radio silence again, urgency creeping into his voice. The American fighter. It is climbing like a Zero. The words carry shock, disbelief, and something close to fear. This is not how the war is supposed to work. Duncan crests the top of the climb with altitude to spare. The Hellcat rolls smoothly, nose dropping through the horizon. Gravity takes over, speed flooding back into the aircraft. His gunsight slides onto the silver shape below. The Zero is hanging in the air, momentarily defenseless. Duncan squeezes the trigger. 6 .50 caliber machine guns erupt, the Hellcat shuddering as streams of tracers leap forward. The sky fills with converging lines of fire. Metal tears. Fuel ignites. Sueda never hears the bullets. One instant, he is fighting physics and disbelief. The next, his cockpit explodes in fire and smoke. The Zero snaps into a spin, trailing flame as it plunges toward the ocean far below. Duncan pulls away, heart hammering, breath ragged. He doesn't cheer, he doesn't shout, he just stares at the empty sky where the Zero had been seconds earlier. Around him, the rest of the engagement unfolds with similar violence. Japanese pilots call out over the radio, confusion spreading through their voices. These are not Wildcats. They climb with us. They do not fall away. What happened over the Pacific that morning is more than a single kill. It is the moment an illusion dies. The belief that Japanese fighters are untouchable in the vertical, that experience alone can overcome American industry. Far below, the ocean swallows the wreckage without a trace. And somewhere aboard U.S. carriers, steaming east of Marcus Island, deck crews are already preparing more of these new fighters for launch. Dark blue, heavy, relentless. The Hellcat has arrived. The story does not begin with Sueda's shock in October. It begins more than a month earlier. August 31st, 1943. Dawn breaks over the Pacific in layers of gray and pale orange as American aircraft carriers cut through a long, slow swell. Flight decks tremble beneath the boots of deck crews, engines coughing to life in the half-light. The smell of aviation fuel hangs thick in the air. On the deck, Rows of unfamiliar fighters wait with folded wings, broad-shouldered, dark navy blue, their noses dominated by massive propellers. To the untrained eye, they look heavy, almost clumsy. They are anything but. This is the combat debut of the Grumman F6F Hellcat. For nearly 2 years, the Imperial Japanese Navy's Zero has ruled the skies of the Pacific. Its pilots are veterans, sharpened by China and the early victories of 1941 and 1942. They fight by instinct and muscle memory, dancing their aircraft through tight turns, climbing effortlessly above their enemies. The Americans have paid for every lesson in blood. Wildcats survive by discipline, teamwork, and diving away, not by winning dogfights. But survival is not dominance, and the U.S. Navy knows it. So somewhere far from the front lines, American engineers made a deliberate choice. They would not try to out-zero the Zero. They would overpower it. The Hellcat is built around that idea. A massive engine producing more than 2,000 horsepower. Thick armor plating around the cockpit. Self-sealing fuel tanks. Wings strong enough to dive at terrifying speeds without tearing apart. And above all, climb performance that defies its size. On paper, it should work. Today, it must prove itself. The target is Marcus Island, a small Japanese outpost bristling with radar, anti-aircraft guns, and fighter strips. It sits isolated, but not undefended. Japanese pilots on the island scramble as radar contacts bloom across their screens. American strike groups form up over the carriers, Hellcats weaving among dive bombers and torpedo planes. Young pilots glance at their instruments, feeling the unfamiliar weight and power of their machines. Many of them have never been shot at before. As they approach Marcus Island, black flak bursts begin to blossom in the sky. The first explosions rock Hellcat formations, punching holes through clouds of exhaust smoke. Then the Zeros arrive. They come in fast and high, silver wings flashing in the sun. The Japanese pilots expect the same fight they've always had. American fighters forced into defensive circles, struggling to keep up. Instead, the sky fractures. Hellcats do not turn tightly with the Zeros. They climb, they dive, they slash through Japanese formations with brutal speed, firing in short, devastating bursts before pulling away vertically upward. Again and again, Japanese pilots try to draw the Americans into classic turning fights. Again and again, the Hellcats refuse. Zeros follow and find themselves unable to keep up. The massive American fighters absorb punishment that would shred lighter aircraft. Bullets spark off armored panels. Fuel tanks seal themselves as if nothing happened. Pilots who would have been dead in earlier aircraft keep flying, keep fighting. By the time the Americans withdraw, Marcus Island burns. Japanese aircraft lie wrecked on the ground and scattered across the sea. For the first time, the balance feels different. Japanese after-action reports reflect confusion rather than outrage. These new American fighters are not as agile, but they are faster, tougher, and alarmingly capable in the climb. Pilots begin adjusting tactics, but habits formed over years are hard to break. And the Hellcat is coming in numbers. Factories in the United States are turning them out faster than Japanese industry can replace losses. Crates of spare parts stack up on carrier decks. New squadrons form, train, and deploy in months, not years. By the time Toshiyuki Sueda pulls back on his stick over the Central Pacific in October, he is unknowingly flying into a future that has already been decided. The Hellcat is no longer an experiment. It is the new standard. And with every encounter, Japanese pilots are learning the same terrifying lesson: what once made them superior no longer guarantees survival. The shock does not fade after October. It spreads. Across ready rooms and airstrips, through radio chatter and handwritten combat reports, a single idea begins to surface among Japanese fighter units, quiet at first, then undeniable. The Americans have changed. In the weeks following Sueda's death, Japanese pilots encounter the Hellcat again and again. Each time, the same pattern repeats. The Americans refuse the old dance. They no longer spiral downward into turning contests. They do not stall beneath the Zero's guns. Instead, they dictate the fight. A Zero dives after a Hellcat only to watch it accelerate away, wings holding firm at speeds that would rip lighter aircraft apart. A Japanese pilot pulls up into a vertical maneuver, trusting instinct and experience, and finds an American fighter climbing beside him, engine roaring, nose steady. The rules that once guaranteed victory no longer apply. In one engagement after another, Hellcat pilots use altitude like a weapon. They climb above Japanese formations, roll over and strike from the sun. 6 heavy machine guns fire at once, their combined weight turning brief hits into catastrophic damage. Zeros burn quickly when struck. There is no armor to save them, no fuel tanks to seal. Japanese pilots begin to adapt, but adaptation takes time, and time is something they no longer have. Many of the men now facing Hellcats are not the elite aviators of 1941. The veterans are thinning, lost over Guadalcanal, over the Solomons, over countless unnamed stretches of ocean. Their replacements have fewer hours, less training, and none of the hard-earned instinct that once gave Japan its edge. Meanwhile, American pilots grow more confident with every sortie. They trust their aircraft. They trust its ability to bring them home. Pilots, who would once have been killed by a single burst, now limp back to carriers with holes in their wings, oil streaking across canopies, engines coughing but still running. Confidence changes everything. Briefings become sharper. Tactics evolve. Hellcat squadrons learn to work in pairs and divisions, covering each other, climbing and diving in disciplined patterns. There is no glory in lone heroics, only results. Japanese pilots listening on open radio channels hear unfamiliar calm in American voices, clear instructions, controlled calls for help, no panic, no desperation. By early 1944, the imbalance is obvious in the numbers. For every Hellcat lost, multiple Japanese aircraft fail to return. And the encounters are growing larger. The war is moving west. Island by island, carrier by carrier, American naval aviation advances toward the heart of Japan's defensive perimeter. With each operation, the air battles grow more massive, the stakes higher. Japanese commanders know a decisive confrontation is coming. One battle where everything will be thrown into the sky at once. Experience, remaining aircraft, and the last hope of stopping the American advance. For the Hellcat pilots, this means something different. They are no longer the underdogs. They are the hunters. They have tested the enemy's strengths. They have exploited his weaknesses. And they have done it repeatedly across months of relentless combat. When intelligence reports arrive, warning of a massive Japanese carrier force preparing to strike, American aviators understand exactly what it means. This will not be another skirmish. It will be a reckoning. Somewhere ahead, over the open waters of the Philippine Sea, hundreds of aircraft will rise into the air at once. Zeros, dive bombers, torpedo planes, everything Japan has left. And waiting for them will be squadrons of Hellcats, engines already warming, pilots strapped in, checking instruments with steady hands. The stage is set for the largest carrier air battle in history. And the outcome, though no one knows it yet, has already been written in the climb of a single American fighter that refused to fall away. June 19th, 1944. Morning light spills across the Philippine Sea as American carrier decks erupt into motion. Steam hisses, engines scream. Deck crews yank chocks free and slap wings as fighters roar down wooden planks and leap into open air. Above the fleet, Hellcats begin stacking into wide protective circles, high CAP combat air patrol, layered by altitude and distance. Pilots check fuel, scan the horizon, and wait. They do not wait long. At 10:00 a.m., radar operators aboard American ships stiffen. Contacts bloom across their scopes, dozens, then hundreds. The Japanese have launched everything. Fighters, dive bombers, torpedo planes, wave after wave pushing eastward in a last attempt to cripple the invasion of the Mariana Islands. In Japanese cockpits, pilots brace themselves for the decisive battle they have trained for. Many are young. Some have never fired their guns in anger. They are told the American fleet lies just ahead, vulnerable, exposed. They believe speed and courage will carry them through. What they meet instead is a wall. Hellcats dive from altitude in disciplined formations, sunlight flashing off dark blue wings. They do not scatter. They do not chase recklessly. They strike, climb, reform, and strike again. A Japanese pilot lines up on an American carrier, then the sky explodes around him. Tracers slash past his canopy. His aircraft shudders as bullets tear through wings and fuselage. He never sees the Hellcat that killed him. American pilots speak calmly over the radio. Bandits at 10 o'clock. Break left. A splash one. Below them, Japanese formations unravel. Escorting Zeros attempt to defend bombers, but are dragged upward into climbing fights they cannot win. Hellcats rise with them, engines pulling strong, guns blazing from positions of advantage. Dive bombers release too early. Torpedo planes skim the waves, riddled with fire before they can line up their runs. Some press on anyway, flying straight into curtains of anti-aircraft fire rising from American ships. The sea fills with smoke, debris, and parachutes. By midday, the pattern is unmistakable. Japanese aircraft are not breaking through. They are being erased. Wave after wave dissolves under Hellcat attacks. Pilots' tally kills faster than they can process them. Ammunition runs low. Fuel gauges dip. And still, more enemy aircraft arrive, only to meet the same fate. By nightfall, the numbers tell a story that borders on the unbelievable. In a single day, American pilots destroy more than 300 Japanese aircraft. Hellcat squadrons account for the overwhelming majority. Losses on the American side are minimal, so lopsided that pilots themselves struggle to comprehend it. Someone jokes over the radio. It's a turkey shoot. The name sticks. For Japan, the battle is catastrophic. Carrier air groups are annihilated. Experienced pilots, what few remain, are gone. The carriers themselves survive the day, but without air wings, they are hollow shells. For the Hellcat, the battle cements its reputation forever. This is no longer an aircraft proving itself. It is the dominant force in the Pacific sky. Pilots land back aboard carriers exhausted, faces streaked with sweat and oil. Deck crews cheer as battered fighters trap safely on pitching decks, wings riddled with holes but engines still running. The Hellcat has done exactly what it was built to do. And from this point forward, Japanese pilots know a brutal truth. The air war is lost. No new tactic, no last reserve of courage, can undo what has been decided in the climb, the dive, and the firepower of an aircraft that outmatches them at every turn. The sky belongs to the Americans now. By 1945, the sky over the Pacific feels different. There is no longer the constant tension of an equal fight, no expectation that every contact could become a deadly duel. Instead, Hellcat pilots patrol vast stretches of ocean with confidence born of experience and superiority. The Japanese air threat has changed not because it has grown stronger, but because it has grown desperate. As American forces push toward Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Japanese aircraft appear less often, and when they do, their intentions are unmistakable. They are not maneuvering for advantage. They are flying straight and low, carrying bombs meant for a one-way journey. Kamikaze. Hellcat pilots spot them early, high above the fleet. Intercepts are swift and merciless. There is no dogfight, no contest of skill, just speed, altitude, and overwhelming firepower. 6 guns fire, targets disintegrate. The Hellcat's rugged design proves invaluable here. Pilots dive aggressively, knowing their aircraft can withstand the stress. Hits that would have destroyed earlier fighters are shrugged off. Damaged Hellcats return again and again, landing with torn flaps, shattered canopies, or engines barely holding together. Each one represents a pilot who lived to fly another mission. Across the Pacific, Japanese airfields lie in ruins. Fuel is scarce. Training hours are cut to almost nothing. New pilots are rushed into combat with barely enough time to learn how to take off, let alone fight a modern American fighter. They face Hellcats flown by veterans of dozens of engagements, men who know exactly how far they can push their aircraft, and how little mercy it offers the enemy. By the final months of the war, Hellcats account for more aerial victories than any other Allied aircraft type in the Pacific. The kill ratios are staggering. Entire Japanese formations are wiped out with minimal American losses. And yet, inside the cockpit, the experience remains intensely personal. Pilots remember the first time they realized the Zero could not outclimb them, the first time they dove away at impossible speed and felt the airframe hold together, the first time they took hits and kept flying. They remember October 1943, though many never knew the date when Japanese pilots first radioed their disbelief. American fighters climbing like Zeros. That moment marked the turning point. The Hellcat did not win the war alone, but it gave American pilots something they had never truly had before in the Pacific: control of the sky. And once the sky was lost, everything else followed. As the war draws to a close, Hellcats still fly patrols over an ocean littered with wreckage and memory. Their paint is faded, their pilots are tired, but the mission is the same as it has been since Marcus Island. Climb higher, hit harder, come home alive. When the engines finally fall silent in August 1945, the Pacific sky feels impossibly empty. For years, it had been alive with contrails, tracers, spiraling aircraft, and radio calls layered with urgency. Now, Hellcats circle lazily over calm seas, their pilots absorbing a reality that feels unreal. There is no enemy left to meet them. The war is over. In ready rooms and aboard carriers, men begin to tally what they survived. Friends lost, aircraft written off, close calls that still wake them at night. And threaded through every story is the same machine, the F6F Hellcat. By the end of the war, Hellcat pilots have destroyed more enemy aircraft than any other Allied fighter type. Thousands of victories, achieved not through reckless heroics, but through doctrine, discipline, and overwhelming performance. The Hellcat did not demand perfection from its pilots. It forgave mistakes and gave them a way home. That alone changes everything. Naval aviation will never again accept fragile superiority. Designers take note. Armor matters, firepower matters, climb rate, dive speed, survivability. These are not luxuries, but necessities. The Hellcat becomes the blueprint for how America fights wars in the air. For Japanese pilots who survived, the memory cuts differently. Many remember the exact moment they knew the war had turned, when an American fighter refused to fall away, refused to stall, refused to obey the old rules, when the sky itself seemed to betray them. Experience, bravery, and tradition could not overcome industrial power harnessed correctly. The Hellcat represents that shift more clearly than any statistic ever could. And it all traces back to moments like October 5th, 1943, high above the Pacific, when a veteran ace pulled into a maneuver that had always guaranteed victory, and found himself staring at an American fighter climbing with him, steady and unstoppable. In that instant, the myth of invincibility died. What replaced it was something far more decisive: control